Good evening, everyone. I hope you are doing well today. So, our agenda for this small group discussion this evening revolves around how fake news influence the dynamics of Philippine presidential election. So, before we begin our discussion, I would like first to lay down some informal rules. Please remain muted unless you like to speak and share your insights so that the speaker is would not be distracted. Also, if you do not agree to the points raised by the speaker, you may politely speak your thoughts afterwards. And of course, if you want to add something, like if there are any instances that you feel that the discussion is somehow lacking in terms of substance, you may freely convey your thoughts. Does everyone agree to these rules?
Yes.
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 Okay, to start our discussion, let us first provide a thorough and clarified operational definition of the concepts that we would possibly discuss. Based on your research, can you share to us what is a scholarly definition of fake news? So anyone could share their thoughts. Uh, yes, Seska, then followed up by Queency.
Uh, on a one article of Leonhard and Thompson in 2017, they described fake news in the New York Times as a type of propaganda or yellow and misleading journalism that consists of deliberate misinformation spread via traditional media outlets or online social media.
Quincy, you may proceed after Seska.
So similar with Seska, according to Alcott and Genco, fake news fake news articles are intentionally and verifiably false and could mislead readers. So basically, fake news appropriates the look and the feel of real news, from how websites look to how articles are written and to how photos include attribution. So fake news hides under a veneer of legitimacy as it takes on some form of credibility by trying to appear like real news.
If I may add, News 2018 said that fake news defines as news that does mischief with the truth. So for News, for him, fake news is both lack of truth and lack of truthfulness. So when we say it's lack of truth, it's the sense that it's either false or it's either misleading. And when we say lack of truthfulness, it is propagated with the intention to deceive or in a manner of, as quote unquote, as Lanyo said, as in a manner of bullshit or in a manner of nonsense. So there is an intention to deceive the readers.
Okay. Yes, Hannah, you may proceed. Then Ira.
I would also like to add that the Cambridge Dictionary defines fake news as false stories that appear to be news and spread on the internet, usually created to influence political views or merely as a joke.
Yes, and since others already discussed that the general definition of fake news is with regard to the erroneous content, I'll just add to that disinformation and misinformation may appear as text, images, video, and audio, or a combination of these, and it's created by human hands also.
Yes, Noel, you may.
Given the definition of everybody, I think we all agree that fake news is a deliberate way of spreading false information to mislead people and possibly alter their perspective on such topics.
And lastly, because it is very hard to form a consensus on the definition of fake news, Oxford Internet Institute suggested that when we are using the word fake news, it is better to use air quotes in using fake news because there are no consensus in the definition of fake news. So it's better to just use air quotes in using fake news. So.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. To synthesize what everyone has mentioned, could we all agree that we could operationalize the definition of fake news as as intentionally misleading that possesses false information, and it is very hard to detect fake news given that it could copy the original source website and other manifestations containing that specific information. So in short, uh, fake news shows what Joel earlier has mentioned, that it shows a lack of truth and or the concept itself of truthfulness. Okay, so does everyone agree to that kind of definition?
Agree.
Yes.
So this time, let me ask you guys, what kind of fake news does exist in social media that concerns politics? Yes,
Um,
Ira.
yes. Partisan disinformation in particular may appear in 7 different kinds. According to Wardle 2070, she devised seven or created 7 kinds of misinformation, ranging from the least harmful to the most harmful. These 7 are satire parody, false connection, misleading content, fake context, imposter content, manipulated content, and the most harmful, which is fabricated content. Fabricated content are the most harmful because its contents are 100% false, meaning that there is an intent of the creator to be that misinformation is deliberately done.
If I may add to Ira, the danger with fabricated content or fabrication is that they make it appear that like it is like real news. They publish it in a style of news article to create legitimacy, but in essence, there are no factual basis in this fabrication.
Others may add if you want to share something. Yes, Hannah, you may.
Based on my research, a majority of the fake news proliferating on social media right now is a type of propaganda. Propaganda refers to news stories that are created by a political entity to influence public opinion. Basically, its goal is to help a public figure, organization, or administration. Similar to advertising, propaganda also is often based on facts, but it incorporates bias that supports a particular stance. While such combination of news and commentary is not uncommon in journalism, um, propaganda often masquerades as an objective and biased piece of news, when in fact its ultimate purpose is to persuade rather than to inform. This is manifested in the news outlet owned by Apollo KBC, SMNI News, if you're familiar with that. On several occasions, SMNI News has been used as a platform to spread propaganda, guised as news to attack journalists, red tag critics of the Duterte administration. For instance, Kibuloy himself has red tagged ABS-CBN, linking this to the Communist Party of the Philippines and its armed wing, New People's Army. With that, actually, in April 2022, the controversial news outlet was flagged by Facebook for violating the social media platform's community guidelines.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. We may call another person. Okay, Quincy, you may share.
So another kind of fake news that is closer or is often encountered by many people, especially through social media, according to Tandok, Lim and Ling 2018, is satire and parody, which mimic mainstream news media with an injection of humor to present audiences with news updates, but usually it is focused on current affairs. So one famous and viral example of parody during 2022 election campaign period is the parody of Presidential Bet by UP Visayas cheer team, which premiered on UPV Facebook page, I think last May 6. So the 5 presidential candidates' agendas, values, and histories were introduced to the viewers using aspects from the presidential forum and comedy like RuPaul's Drag Race, if you're familiar with that. And the performance's message is clear. Mindless fanaticism is not the answer, especially in this times of election. So each of the 5 presidential bets was represented by Lenden Robredo, Bleng Blong Narcos, Kurt Morenono, Manny Pacquiao, and Pingping Lacson in the routine. So the group was able to inject humor and poke fun at the presidential contenders' habits and public image while still imparting an important message to Filipinos through tongue-in-cheek discourse. So the discussion highlighted various candidates' positions and their ideas on different subjects and issues, especially the controversial West Philippine Sea, the drug war, and COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Queency. No? So let us now proceed to where can you usually locate fake news, and particularly where can you locate it in the different social media platforms? Could you provide examples? Yes, Noel.
While there are a lot of fake news present in different social media, I think Facebook is where they truly thrive because given the current state of our country's economy, wherein everything is expensive, people would prioritize getting other necessities rather than availing internet data. And with that, they would rely on free data, which allows them to browse Facebook. I think this is one of the reasons why fake news is very rampant on Facebook because fake news peddlers know that Facebook is very accessible to a lot of people, especially coming from the middle class bracket.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Just
Jolop.
adding a statistic to Noel's claim, on We Are Social Digital's report 2021, according to them, around 72% of Filipinos get news from social media site, with Facebook as the #1 news source. However, there is a problem arises when news obtained in these platforms are unverified, false, or misleading.
Okay, thank you, Jolop. Seska, I saw you raise your hand earlier. If you wanna add something, you can do it.
Oh, it's fine. Noel already said my answer. Thank you so much.
Ira, then to be followed by Queency.
Noel and Jolop have already said that Facebook is a breeding ground, but I'll just add that TikTok is also an emerging breeding ground for misinformation, given its wide reach and influence. According to the data in January 2022, in the Philippines alone, 36 million users, 18 age and above, of Filipino origin are subscribing to TikTok. So imagine that 36 million people are subscribed and sees this misinformation. So it would not be far-fetched to say that some may be gullible and they may also follow this and the diffusion of disinformation may easily propagate.
So similar to what they said, Facebook and TikTok are among the most used social media platforms of voters and where fake news always thrive. But along with those social media platforms is Twitter. So according to former Twitter managing director, Twitter, like any other social media network, is facing an escalating problem of fake news and disinformation. As a result, Twitter developed a new safety function for reporting suspected disinformation, which has been tested in few locations and is currently accessible in the Philippines. And according to them, they have recorded a lot of fake news circulating, especially about the election 2022.
Okay,
Just to add
yes,
on
Jolop.
Ira's answer on TikTok, I believe that, on my own opinion, because I believe that TikTok is a very easy to absorb. The information on TikTok is very easy to absorb because it contains video clips which last like 6 seconds or 5 seconds. And Filipinos, I think they like to go with the flow with the flow of information. So with an avenue like TikTok, where you watch a video lasting for 6 seconds, I think that it is very easy to see why fake news thrives there.
So
Yes, for our last point for this question.
So if I may add, according to the researchers, while the three social media platforms, fake news always rub on those three social media platforms, TikTok is the most dangerous since TikTok's lack of transparency, both in terms of how users encounter content and the number and kind of disinformation on the network, is particularly concerning because unlike Facebook and Twitter, it does not publicly reveal whether it removes misleading information or the networks of accounts that support it, despite publishing quarterly reports.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Quincy, for pointing that out. So, could we all agree that the primary platforms where these kinds of fake news or disinformation thrive is face the number two top two, I guess, is what you have guys discussed is Facebook and TikTok, and the types of fake news that spread around these social media platforms contain satire, parody, propaganda, and these are very harmful in nature. Could you guys agree to that point before we proceed?
Yes.
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 Agree.
Okay. So having everything said, which Philippine presidential elections did fake news became controversial? So can you kindly share your answers and the evidences that support it?
Actually, President Rodrigo Duterte's 2016 campaign was the first in the Philippines to capitalize and utilize the potential of social media. In fact, according to his social media manager, Duterte's campaign used an army of internet trolls to amplify his message throughout Philippine cyberspace. These trolls then promote disinformation in favor of Duterte's policies and continue to do so up to this very day. Furthermore, during an event to commemorate World Press Freedom Day, Asia Center discussed and assessed the impact of social media on mainstream media and election campaigning. Here, Maritas Ditog, editor at large at Rocker, said that since the 2016 vice presidential election, Bongbong Marcos had and his supporters have used disinformation on social media to positively brand and praise him while negatively affecting his rival Lenny Robredo. However, according to the discussion during this event, they concluded that this information has definitely increased during the 2022 Philippine presidential election campaign compared to the 2016 elections.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. We may call another person to provide. Yes, Queency. Then we would proceed to the next part of our agenda.
So just to add to what Hannah said, campaign managers of Duterte admitted that they really utilize Facebook, especially. So one of Duterte's followers and campaign allies, Gabonata, noted that message of the week is one of their strategies. So the message of the week was mainly delivered in the form of trending hashtags on Twitter or comments on social media articles. So each message was tailored to the difficulties Duterte was facing or the findings of the polls with the hashtag Duterte tilde. And so this includes the many supporters, how Duterte actually changed Davao and how he is ready to change the Philippines. So when they want particular news or items to trend on Twitter, they said that they utilize real humans, not bots, who post anything or retain the same tweet or for a brief trend, they just copy and paste message in certain circumstances.
Okay, thank you for that insight, Quincy. So it is very evident that President Rodrigo Duterte and his officials truly employ different techniques that could propagate fake news. So let us now proceed to the main focus of our discussion or agenda for tonight. So guys, could you give me some examples of fake news in which Filipinos encounter during the pre-election and the post-election period? Yes, Noel.
In a compilation created by Rappler, it is evident that politically motivated fake news during pre-elections came in different forms, such as sliced videos, false statements from different personalities, distorted and manipulated pictures, and wrong and unrelated resources.
Okay, others may add their insights and values to what Noel have said. Let's have Hannah first, then let's call Quincy. Hannah, you
Like
may.
Noel said, fake news has become one of the most pressing issues in our country. That Rappler has created an entire separate section combating this. During the pre-election period, I think we can all agree that the number one fake news we encountered is the glorification of Ferdinand Marcos Sr.'s dictatorship. Supporters of the Marcos family would often claim that Philippines was one of the richest country during the dictatorship of Ferdinand E. Marcos Sr., which is false. In fact, based on the article that Rappler made regarding this. They based this on the compared GDP of the countries from 1965 to 1986, wherein they were able to conclude that the Philippines did not in fact reach the level as one of the richest country in Asia, let alone in the world. In fact, according to World Bank data, when Marcos took office in 1965, the Philippines ranked 25th of the list of countries by GDP. Afterwards, when the Marcos family was outed in 1986, the Philippines dropped to 39th out of 156 countries as a repercussion of the legacy the Marcos family left behind in the country.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. Quincy, you may add for the last point regarding this particular question.
So part of the fake news that thrived during the pre-election period is that the wealth of the Marcoses, including 196,000 or more tons of gold, was given as a payment from the Taliano family to Ferdinand Marcos. So there's an issue with this account since it's completely false. So the Maharlika Kingdom and the Taliano family were fictional characters. So as multiple court proceedings in the country and even abroad have revealed, Marcos' riches are all ill-gotten and are best explained by rampant corruption and robbery of the public coffers during his years in office. So this is one of the massive disinformation effort that actually captured tons of voters according to the researchers. It intended at whitewashing the Marcos government. So the ad presents the Marcos dictatorship as the Philippines' golden period, as just what Hannah said, and makes other outlandish claims such as Philippines being the world's third richest economy at the time.
Okay, thank you, Quincy, for pointing that out. So, let us now talk about the roles and functions of fake news during the 2016 and the 2022 Philippine presidential election. So, how guys, how do you think did fake news affect the images of the involved presidential candidates during on both elections? I can see Ira. Yes, Ira.
I'll be specific during the 2022, this recent election. With supporting data, according to check.ph 2022, from the start of the year, specifically January 2022, they have conceived more than 200 fact checks. And with these 200 fact checks, they conclude that VP Robredo became the biggest victim of disinformation, while former Senator and now President-elect Marcos Jr. mostly received positive response from Varsity Stadium Post. Um, how did VP Robredo was seen? They from the slices video, Robredo's quotes have been mangled, twisted, or fabricated to make her look like that she is spouting nonsense. And with this, she conceived nicknames such as Madame, Lutang, lightheaded, stupid, and stammerer, and this affected her image in the general populace.
Okay, thank you, Ira. I see Seska raising her hand. Seska, you may proceed.
I'd also like to add that the spread of fake news has ultimately two major intentions, to positively and negatively affect targets. In the recent presidential election, the primary targets of disinformation proved to be Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos and Leni Robredo. The only difference, though, is that the former is positively praised while the latter is negatively attacked. The majority of misleading information involving Bongbong are meant to praise and glorify him and his family's legacy. On the other hand, false information surrounding Robredo aim to malign and ruin her image. Thank you.
Thank you, Ses. I could call Quincy as I saw her raise her hand earlier for the last point.
So for the 2016 presidential election, fake news framed Duterte as the strongman that will end drugs in the Philippines and bring change. So, as Filipinos became tired of promises often circulating on solving poverty and corruption, especially that the preceding president was known with the motto, "Kayo ang boss ko," people want something new, a new style of campaigning, which Duterte was able to give as the social media or the fake news framed him as a strongman that will save the Philippines. However, when he was elected, he extrajudicial killings project by police and encouraging vigilant justice in this country, Duterte's war on drugs just killed an estimated 12,000 people, including children, and most of them are poor people.
Okay, thank you, Queency. So aside from the image of the involved presidential candidate, how about voter preference? How do you think did fake news shape the preference of Filipino voters? Yes, yes. You may proceed.
So false and misleading informating proliferating social media platforms has significantly influenced Filipino voters. It has definitely swayed and manipulated the public's perception on the presidential candidate. Most importantly, it has transformed the public into a misinformed electorate.
Okay, thank you, Seska. Yes, Quincy.
So, according to the researchers, fake news shape preferences of voters can differ according to the classes. So, most voters, especially older ones and from lower classes, are the main victim of fake news as they do not have the privilege to fact check and and often resort to populist presidents. Meanwhile, middle class voters are divided. Some have the ability to fact checks and have the privilege to check if the information and news are true and help spread facts. Meanwhile, some also of poor populist presidents. Meanwhile, the upper classes, just like middle classes, are also divided.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who would like to
I
add?
think that it's always about the narrative and the narrative that fake news presents. So in choosing the president or in voting preferences, the fake news peddlers created the narrative that VP Leni Robredo, as earlier said, is lutang or dumb or she doesn't know what she's saying. So for the people, when a presidential candidate is dumb or lutang and doesn't know what she is saying, it doesn't leave a good impression on her being a good president. So that affects voting preferences. If a president doesn't know what she wants or what she says, it's not good. The people don't want to vote her. And on the other side, the fake news framed Marcos Jr., Ferdinand Marcos Jr., as smart, as an orator, as a copy of the late dictator. So I think that narrative, the creation of that narrative, affects the voting preferences of the Filipinos.
Okay, thank you, Jolo. So let us now move further beyond the political image and the voter preference. Fake news has also created what we may call as distrust and fragmentation amongst Filipinos and between Filipinos and the government itself. How do you think so? Let us call Hannah first, then Seska, you may follow up Hannah.
I think the need of votante voters is a manifestation of the fragmentation or division created by fake news. During post-election, we can observe that the blame was initially put on the misinformed electorate. The masses were used as a scapegoat for corrupt politicians' propaganda. In my opinion, I think it's all too easy to demonize and label those who vote for plunderers, human rights abusers, history revisionists as foolish or irrational. I think that shall only prove to be counterproductive to my belief. And based on my research, I think those voters are also governed by reason. Unfortunately, just by corrupted logic and distorted facts that were presented to them, they are merely unfortunate victims of ideological manipulation and fake news.
Okay, thank you, Hannah, for raising those points. Seska, you may now share your thoughts.
So yes, like what Hannah said, the disinformation campaign led by the Marcos camp has resulted in distrust and division, not only between the BBMs and the campaigns, but it has created fragmentation among the masses. The proliferation of fake news not only target the candidates, but it has also affected the general public. Specifically, it has fostered hostility among Filipinos, resulting in an internal conflict that benefits corrupt politicians in power by making us more vulnerable and susceptible to manipulation.
Okay, thank you, Seska. Yes, Noel, for our last point regarding this question.
To add with what Hannah and Saska said, I think that with a lot of misinformation and disinformation circulating online, Filipinos then develop this distrust, and it in a way they don't know which news to believe anymore because of everything that is happening. And we should also take into consideration how this affects their perception with the electoral process, with the authenticity of the electoral process. So yeah, I think they no longer believe the results because of the saturation of fake news online, or not even online, but in every platform available.
And I just want to say that it is ironic that the primary camp is proliferating fake news and creating a divide as a tagline of unity. So let's just leave it that.
Okay, thank you, Noel and Jolo. So, I would just like to synthesize all your points regarding this particular part of our discussion agenda tonight. So, based on what you guys have mentioned, fake news has resulted to various and diverse outcomes. So, in terms of the political image, it could foster harm or it could destroy the politicians involved. But on the other hand, it could also make a certain politician look good in the face of the public. It could also shape or alter voter preference for the worse. And of course, I guess based on what you have guys discussed, um, the most extreme outcome that it may cause is that it could fool Filipinos, and fooling Filipinos, or particularly the voters, to as a part, as they are the main actor of the election as a political process. This could put several politicians whose vested interests are at place and not for the welfare or the well-being of the Filipinos. Okay, so now let us now proceed to the discussion of the most relevant and pressing impacts of fake news in the present and in the long run. So, do you guys believe that historical revisionism is a looming threat due to the rise of fake news nowadays? Ira first, then Noel. Ira may proceed.
First, I'll just set the terminologies straight. Historical revisionism is not bad per se, because you revise history because there may be some incongruencies or erroneous nature on that fact or that matter. So so historical evidences must be corrected. However, what is bad or what we are fearing of is actually historical distortion, in which historical facts or reality is distorted or fabricated to suit a particular group's interests. And just recently, the family of the president-elect has had made a statement in which the most important to them is actually their family's name. So the answer is yes, there's really a looming threat through historical distortion, but not historical revision.
Uh, to
Yes,
use the
Noel.
term used by Ira, I think historical distortion is no longer a looming threat, but in a sense, it is. We are already experiencing its effects because in 2016, it was being started by the party of the Marcoses, but now we are experiencing its full effect because historical distortion brought Bongbong Marcos and his family back into power. And in the upcoming years, we might experience it at a larger scale that the Filipino people will have to suffer.
Okay, thank you, Noel. Queency, for the last point concerning this question.
So to add to what they said, with the proliferating of fake news in social media, at present, I think historical distortion is only evident and perpetuated on social media platforms and therefore can still be fact-checked or clarified. However, in the long run, I think historical distortion will be far wider and deeper and will be written even in books where future generations will find it hard to fact-check.
Yes,
Lastly,
Jolo.
I just like to end with a quote that those who do not learn from the history are doomed to repeat. So
Yes, thank you for pointing that quote. So, for lastly, I would like to ask you guys if you think fake news risk the democratic processes in the country. Could you cite a particular manifestation or example, if you have? Yes, Seska, then I guess we could end with Noel.
So fake news is a growing threat to democratic elections in the Philippines and other liberties due to the constant targeting of hyper-partisan ideas that prey on people's ignorance and biases in order to influence their voting plans and behavior. Social media proves to be a conduit of fake news, and it continues to project its potential harmful influence to project its potential harmful influence on democracy. So exacerbating the already prevalent practices of political selective exposure.
Okay, Noel, if you may.
Uh, to add with what Seska and to just sum it up, I think fake news risks the democratic process in the country because it spreads false information which influences the perception of the people. In a way, it invalidates and disrespects the right of the people to authentic and honest information. Uh, because if the information they are being given or being made available lacks veracity. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nobel. Queency and Jollof, I saw you guys raise your hands. If you may present your ideas, you can do it in a very short.
So fake news is a real problem as what we all know and what we discussed. That is eroding the pillars of safety, security, and justice with each passing day it spreads. So it is creating a climate in which voters are increasingly unsure and confused about what is true and what is not, making it more difficult to make an informed decision, especially in the case of voting. So the integrity and essence of the election, a product of democracy, which is freely choosing leader, is not being achieved. So legitimate voices and facts are being drowned out while skewing public opinion. So indeed, fake news is a threat to our democracy and democratic processes, as it hampered and poisons the very essence of democracy, which is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
just to end, I would just like to quote Philippine journalist, co-founder of CEO and recipient of last year's Nobel Prize Award, Maria Ressa. As Maria Ressa said, "You cannot have integrity of elections if you don't have integrity of facts. If they make the facts debatable, they are essentially dooming our nation."
Okay, thank you, Jollof. I guess that that is a good way to end our discussion. So, to summarize the last part of our discussion for tonight, I guess we could safely conclude that fake news is very problematic, because it serves as a game changer that put uh, several politicians in power with their having their personal interests as their priority over the interests of the constituents that they serve. I guess we could also safely say that it destroys democracy since it fosters lies and deception over truth. And I guess that's it. Thank you very much, guys, for your cooperation for tonight's discussion. And I hope we could see and we could assess fake news over any other information that we see online. So thank you very much, guys. Have a great night.